And once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Buffalo History Channel. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support. Definitely see me rocking this beautiful hoodie supplied by Idris and Alexa Wajed of eatoffart.com. Definitely make sure you stop by their website and show them some love. Definitely thank you all for the merch. And I'd love to give a special shout out to everyone in Buffalo's art community. Now, this interview right here, we strive to highlight the figures of Buffalo Black media. And this one is a very prominent figure right here that I have on the show today. This gentleman is Dr. Patrick Freeman. You remember go back in the 1990s, I believe, he was the host of a very long time radio show called The Message. And Pat, and first of all, let me just say, Pat, Dr. Patrick Freeman, give it to you properly. Welcome to the Buffalo History Channel.
My pleasure, Doug. You know, you're one of my favorite people. And, it's an honor to be on with you. Honor to be here with you always. You do a great job in chronicling the history of our community. And you've done that for a number of years, and I'm honored to be with you.
Absolutely. Now, before we talk about the message, I have to tell you, Pat, I was just thinking about when I was thinking about your show, it's so interesting. Today we see things particularly on this platform is on YouTube, and I see so many platforms talking to some of our most prominent Black scholars and highlighting old videos of our Black scholars. And shout out to Tariq Nasheed for producing the amazing Hidden Colors series. And I have to say that one of the front runners to all of that really was your show, The Message. So first off, talk to us about how did The Message come about, and what was it that inspired you to create a show such as The Message?
Well, I started when I was working at University of New York at Stony Brook, working with the students out there, and the name of their program was The Message. And as you know, students come and go, but after they left, I came back to Buffalo, and I sent a copy of one of those programs to Miss Sheila L. Brown, who is now the owner of WUFO Radio. At the time, she was the sales manager, and her and Miss Lenore Williams gave me an opportunity to start The Message September the 9th of 1994. And I'm forever grateful to them for allowing me to be on the air for some 14 years.
Wow, I have to say, you said September of 1994. Incidentally, that was actually the same time that I actually got myself into working in the Buffalo media. As a matter of fact, WNED. Amazing, amazing. So, what was the message about? It was mainly an interview show. What were you aiming to do with that show in Buffalo?
Well, I really idolized Ted Kirkland. I thought Ted Kirkland was one of the best broadcasting personalities of our day and yesterday. When I first saw him as a child on Channel 7, Kirkland and Company,
Yes.
and then at WUFO, he had Kirkland's Corner. I just felt that he was my inspiration. He told me the first day I was on the air to make sure I kept writing, and that's what I did. And I noticed that he would interview some very prominent people. So I would try to interview as many people so we did not conflict with one another, though on occasion we did, like Dr. Elefari Hutchinson, Alton Maddox, those type of interviews we shared. But I wanted to bring critical thinkers to the community, the Dr. Naeem Akbars, the Francis Cress Welsons, and Professor James Smalls, Steve Coakley that basically forced you to analyze the circumstance of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and how people were used either knowingly or unknowingly to bring about the opportunity for one of our greatest leaders' assassination. So we included that in uh, the book, The Art of the Interview, Book One, because I think it's a critical part of our history in understanding what happened to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and also other leaders such as Kwame Ture. I mean, that's priceless, timeless. It's an interview. He was very sick at the time of that interview, and just having him on, I was in awe, and Ayasa Shabazz, Malcolm X's brilliant
Yes.
daughter. He has six daughters. All of them are incredible critical thinkers. I thought it was, important to bring those people to the heart of our community on a weekly basis.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And might have neglected to say that today, Dr. Patrick Freeman is now in can now add author to his repertoire. He has put out a book called The Art of the Interview, which actually is going to begin to chronicle in detail many of his interviews which took place throughout the years on the message. We're going to talk about a few of those interviews right here. The one thing that stood out to me, Pat, I can remember your interview with Steve Coakley, and when you talked about the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, which I was always intrigued by. You talked with Steve Coakley. You sent me the video on Dick Gregory and his analysis, and even today, you can go on YouTube and hear videos from Judge Joe Brown and
Yes.
his analysis of what that was. Take us back to the interview of Steve Coakley and talk to us about that interview with him and how he was talking about and give us your impressions and thoughts of his opinions of Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination.
Yeah, I thought that was one of my best interviews because I had to break down tape of Steve Coakley's presentations on that particular circumstance. And I thought he had done one of the most brilliant jobs on breaking down the circumstance of how Dr. King's assassination took place and understanding that people were used knowingly and unknowingly to get to Dr. King, how the invaders were removed from the Lorraine Motel just hours before that assassination. And then my brother, James Freeman Jr., we made a trip to the Lorraine Motel so I could physically look at those circumstances that Steve Coakley was talking about. And man, I tell you, a chill just came across me because when you walk up to the Lorraine Motel, the music of the great Mahalia Jackson singing Precious Lord, Take My Hand is being played. And they left that room, 306, in the same condition it was in prior to the assassination. The newspapers, the ashtrays, because everybody back then smoked cigarettes.
Yes.
But to physically be able to go there and then understand the amount of research that Steve Coakley did in his critical analysis of piecing together one of the most horrible events in this nation's history. The murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I think, is one that needs to be critically analyzed. And that's one of the reasons I put that chapter in the book. And I hope everyone will take time to read that chapter along with the other 8 chapters. You don't have one thing about that book, you don't have to read it in order because each individual chapter is a interview within itself. So there is no real chronological order that you have to read the book. But that particular chapter itself, and the late Steve Coakley, who has now gone on to the Ancestry, he did a extraordinary job. But he also reached out analytically to the works of Dick Gregory and others on the assassination to make a critical analysis of the circumstances that led to Dr. King's assassination.
Okay. Now, and I'll definitely encourage people to get Dr. Freeman's book, The Art of the Interview, to get more information on that interview. Let's move on to another interview that you did with Kwame Ture, which is another landmark interview. Kwame Ture, aka Stokely Carmichael, was someone who was very prominent in the not just the civil rights movement, but he was one of the architects of the Black Power movement. Can you take us back to what the essence of what that interview was about, and just the opportunity to interview someone of his stature?
Yeah, I want to thank Brother Tahaka, Brother Changa Lumumba. They helped to put that interview together when it was probably the last time that Brother Kwame Ture came to Buffalo. He was speaking at Buffalo State. He was very ill at the time, and he was suffering from a form of cancer. And I had an opportunity to ask him, you know, what were the circumstances of his illness, and he was very forthright. He said the CIA gave me this. That's what he said. That was his exact words. He said the CIA gave me this. And he was one of the greatest interviews I've ever had. I was in awe because here's a man that dedicated his life for the freedom of African people, not only here in this country, but around the world. He was a world influence. And it was just, I just have such a great memory of that opportunity to question and to exchange with such a great person. And Kwame Ture, one of the greatest leaders of the civil rights struggle with the SNCC organization. Him and Willie Mukasa are the ones that coined the term Black Power. And they both coined that term, and it became a symbol.
That would be Willie Ricks, correct?
Yes, his Mukasa is Willie Ricks would be his U.S. name, but he used to at Morehouse College, which I attended from 81 to 86. He would be in the cafeteria every day recruiting young minds and trying to get them to see the power of struggle. And many of us didn't take him seriously back then because you thought you knew everything at that age. But I look back at him very fondly and realize that he, Kwame Ture, John Lewis, they were some of the greatest. Jamil Alameen, who formerly was known as H. Rap Brown, some of the greatest leaders of the civil rights struggle. And it was just a pleasure to have the opportunity to conversate with this great leader before he made his transition.
Another figure that you had a chance to speak with on the program is the late, great, illustrious Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. If you have not read the book, The ISIS Papers, definitely make sure that is a read for a lifetime, in my opinion. I read
absolutely
that when I was in my college days. Talk to us about that interview. When did that interview actually take place?
I interviewed her a few times. It was in late 90s, early 2000s, and each time was just incredible. She is just one of the most brilliant, critical thinkers that we have ever had. And I think her book is a must read so people begin to understand this thing, white supremacy and racism. A lot of people don't understand white supremacy and racism. And she was the one that would take it and critically break it down. And as you know, there's only one race on the planet, and that's the human race. And she would break down how this thing of white supremacy and racism came into being and to analyze certain things that they do to remain in power. Now, she would also say that if we do not deal with this subject matter, which we're still dealing with today, and she has made her transition, that we will never have peace, that we will never have an understanding and a respect for one another as a human race here on this planet until we deal with the evils of white supremacy,
Yes.
which was is really the uh, father and the bastard child is the creation of racism, because there is only one race on this planet, and that is the human race. And I think her book is a must read for all of those who are trying to bring peace on this planet and end the tyranny of white supremacy at every corner of the globe.
Let me just break away from just talking about the interviews for a second. Talk to us about your. I don't want to think. Let me think of how to frame this. Some of your. What are some of your? I mean, outside of what you've covered in the book, because this is book one. What
Yes.
were some of your other favorite interviews and some of your favorite memories? What to talk about? Also talk about the impact that the message made on the Buffalo community throughout the years.
Well, I would hope that beginning with that, I would hope the impact uh, was strong because, back then we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have social media, we barely had email. I had to write most of my guests written letters and call them to get them on the program. So it was a different day back then. So, I'm hoping that the impact was strong. I don't really know. A lot of people have told me they remember the program and felt that it was a good program, but I hope the impact was positive. Eventually, it did end. But, in my eyesight, I thought the impact. Anytime you're bringing positive information and information to your community, certainly you think that that is a huge contribution. Um, I've received some noteworthy awards around that, but I really, you have to ask your audience. In radio, as you well know, you depend on the feedback of your audience on the impact of what you're doing. And I would hope bringing some of these great minds to the airwaves, it helped to change the minds and the lives of the people that had an opportunity to hear them. But that, some of my other interviews that, you know, were landmark to me. I interviewed Dr. Joseph Ben Yakinen on many occasions.
Yes,
And,
talk to us about that. Now, definitely got to talk to us about that. That's reels of
yeah,
reels.
and we brought Dr. Ben to Buffalo for our gathering of the elders. We did that at the old Channel 7 building. We brought Dr. Ben there, and he was our keynote speaker when we honored several elders from our community. We did that in the late 2000s when the old Channel 7 building was still available
Yes.
for rentals. But um, I thought that was one of our best programs. We had dancers, we had entertainment, we had poetry, and then our keynote speaker was Dr. Joseph Ben Yakinen. Um, Another one of my interviews that was very memorable is hard for me to get because I love controversial interviews,
Yes.
and I didn't feel it was that controversial, but other people did. I interviewed Dr. Khalid Muhammad, and Dr. Khalid Muhammad was one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. He was also a fraternity brother, as you well know. He's a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity
Yeah.
Incorporated, and he was a very. It took me about a year to get him on. I just kept bugging him, and finally I got him on, and I thought that was one of the better interviews.
Mhm.
Probably the largest interview I ever did is not in this book, was with Donald Sly Green from the federal penitentiary
Yes.
in Florida.
Yes. That,
Um,
that one got a lot of attention.
a lot of attention from the legal authorities and the not so legal authorities, but I had over 100,000 people responded to that interview, and one of the largest interviews I ever did. It was a two-part interview. I did that in 20. It was a special edition of the message
Now,
in
how were you
20.
able to get that interview?
I wrote him. I went through the corrections portal, and you have to make an agreement to allow the government to read the emails. So everything's on the level, of course. And
Right.
I wanted to remember, I wanted to do that interview in person, but we couldn't get permission from the federal penitentiary to do that. So we had to do it over the phone, and it was a pay phone, and he could only talk for 13 minutes. And then he'd have to be off for 45 minutes. So for us to do a 2-hour interview took us 8 to 10 hours. And it was a challenge, but we got it done. And it was one, I think, of my best interviews I've ever done. And, to this day, I stay in contact with him, just give him some upliftment because he's been in prison now uh, close to 30 years. And um, everybody is capable of changing in my eyesight. And he's been a pretty positive person about his change. And he feels that he could help some of these young people avoid some of the pitfalls that he has. And the biggest pitfall that he has, he was given 4 life terms and 135 years. And he's trying to this day to get out. He's one of the most noteworthy jailhouse lawyers in the country. He's argued 166 cases before the Supreme Court. He taught himself law because he knew that was the only way he would ever have a chance of getting out of the situation that he's in. But that was probably one of the most controversial and noteworthy interviews I've ever done. I received a lot of attention from that interview, and that's probably the most controversial. I mean, of any, because there always there's good and bad takes on whoever you're interviewing.
Right.
Um, but that was probably one of the most controversial. But you approach every interview the same way. I mean, my philosophy has always been to try to pull the information from that person and to try to understand and know every answer before I ask that question. So it would require me to do a tremendous amount of research on each and every person that I interviewed. And it also helped me learn who I was interviewing, learn about them and what made them the person that they are. So that's the way I approached that for more than 14 years. And that was probably my most noteworthy interview, and that was a special edition of the message. But I also enjoyed interviewing Dr. Olafari Hutchinson. He wrote the foreword in my book, The Conscious Rasta, Brother Katie Obiawadu, who is another brilliant researcher, Dr. Naeem Akbar. Probably one of my favorite interviews too was Dr. Jeremiah Wright, right after that situation happened, with then Senator Barack Obama's presidential campaign.
Take us back to that interview.
Well, I had to go through his office at Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago and his administrative staff, and they asked me to sign an NDA saying that I would not ask any questions related to then Senator Barack Obama at all during the course of the interview. And I did that. And when that interview started, you know, you could tell that he had been affected by the national attention because it was the Hillary Clinton campaign that started that. A lot of people don't want to say that or realize that, but that is a fact. It was the Hillary Clinton campaign that started the controversy with Dr. Jeremiah Wright. They took a small snippet of his sermon and tried to cast him as a racist. And when you talk to this super intelligent man that had over 146 different ministries in Chicago, and the amount of work that he has done throughout the course of his career, which included stints in the United States military, calling him a racist is one of the worst things that you could do, because he will go down as one of the greatest theologians and historians of the 20th and 21st centuries. And interviewing him, it started kind of, you could tell he didn't trust me, you know, at first. But as the interview proceeded, you can tell in the interview itself that he found a comfort zone with me and began to loosen up. And that's another, he's a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and also a 33rd degree Prince Hall Mason. And we found a very good kinship during the course of that interview, and it became one of my favorite interviews of all time. And I included that in my, I think it's the last chapter in the book. And I also publicly said that I was disappointed in the Obamas and how they treated him. I did not think that a person of his notoriety deserved that type of ostracizing for the sake of political gain. Now, whether people agree with that or not, if you analyze the work of Dr. Jeremiah Wright, I think he's deserving of a lot better from all those that know him and know of his work.
Okay. You also interviewed you mentioned before early in the show that you interviewed the daughter of Malcolm X.
Yes.
Many, there have been many, even as of recent date, there have been many productions done to this day on the life of Malcolm X. In fact, there was the Netflix series, which was a wonderful series that was put together on Malcolm X, on the assassin, on who shot Malcolm X. Talk to us about the interview that you did with Elisha Shabazz.
Well, it was, once again, you're in awe, because there are certain families in our generational lives, the King family, Malcolm X's family, Medgar Evers' family, that we regard as royalty in the fight for freedom amongst African people in this country. And she is a member of that royal family. And I have such a high level of respect for her father and her sisters and her mother. Dr. Betty Shabazz was an incredible person within her own right. That I was a little nervous at first. I'm nervous every time I do anything, but it was such an honor to interview her. We talked about her book, Growing Up X, and we also talked about, some things related to what was going on in that day. And sometimes, um, during the course of the interview, you could feel her pain. She was just a baby when her father was taken from her, and she was in the room. Now, whether um, the cognitive development, I think, is there. That pain is still with her and all of her siblings. But I thought it was one of the greatest honors of my life, just to talk to someone on that level. And she is still out here doing her work as a writer, a lecturer, and also she did some acting. She was on a couple of the soaps
Okay.
back in the day. We had a pretty funny moment during the interview.
I remember.
We were talking about One Life to Live and All My Children, and I said, well, a lot of don't you think a lot of guys don't watch soap operas, because we do. And she was one of my best interviews, and it was an honor to include her in a chapter of the book, because I regard her and her entire family as part of our royal family of freedom fighters. And she certainly represented herself, her family, her mother and father in a very high level. And of course, she represented herself at a high level, which she continues to do today.
Okay. Well, before we get ready to close out the interview, can you talk to us about, in addition to this book, we know that you are a recent retiree.
Yes.
Talk to us about some of the other things that, as a retiree, I'm sure life doesn't stop for you. Talk about some of the other irons that you got in the fire.
Well, I affiliated last year with the Minor Football League, founded by Dr. Richard D. Miles Sr. in 1993. The Minor Football League is a developmental professional league, and we have brought a franchise to New York State. It's the first franchise for the Minor Football League in New York State. So I'm in charge of that franchise, and also I'm the vice president for the Minor Football League for business development. I just received that appointment in the last few weeks, and we're trying to build a sports empire across this country. And now the league is expanding over to Africa. We're going to put 16 teams in Africa, and this should be happening very, very soon. And this is one of the great pleasures of being retired from your original money-making profession. You get to write books and expand your entrepreneurial obsessions, especially with sports. A lot of people thought my book was about sports, but and they had forgot about the message. And I told them, no, there's nothing about sports in this book at all, other than mentioning that I am the senior vice president of business development for the Minor Football League, and brought a Minor Football League franchise to Rochester. The Chargers of the Minor Football League are going to play their inaugural season at the Rochester Community Sports Complex. It's a very nice stadium, which was first built for the soccer team that they had there, that has since moved on. So, I'm looking forward to it. We're hoping for the best. Success is something you're always looking for, but as long as you try to do your best, you look for success. But failure is not something we're afraid of, but it's also not an option for us either.
Okay, so in closing, um, what do you think was the importance of the message to the city of Buffalo, as well as to Buffalo Black media in general?
Well, I hope the message helped to enlighten our community, bring interest to critical thinking. I think we have a new generation of critical thinkers that could have been affected by this program, in which includes yourself and many others that are all critical thinkers. And that's all that you want to do is to have a positive effect on your community, especially in the industry of broadcasting and talk radio. Talk radio has now expanded to the podcast realm and everything else. But back in the day, all we had was radio opportunities. There were no podcasts or things of that nature. There was no social media, Facebook Live, Instagram Live, and everything else. All we had was the radio dial. And I think during this age, we tried to bring positive information by bringing these critical thinkers and writers to our community each and every week. And I did this for 14 years. I've collected over 400 interviews, which will hopefully come out to books 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8
Looking
in the
forward.
not too near distant future if I'm given that opportunity.
All right. Well, Patrick, Dr. Patrick Freeman. And for our audience, where did the doctor come from? Talk about your recent honor.
Well, I received a Doctorate of Humane Letters from Global Overday Seminary and University, and they also, I'm now the Assistant Dean of Business Development for that university, and I'm very grateful to them for this honor. And we continue to work to educate people around the world. Global Overday University is one of the great, educational mechanisms that we have in our community. And there's a lot of people connected to that university that people should really keep their eyes on. Dr. Jesse Sharp, Dr. Joseph Hickman, the great chancellor, Dr. Diane Eubanks, the founder of the MFL, Dr. Richard D. Miles Sr., Dr. Charles Alawali. There are some great, great people, not only in this country, but across the seas over in Africa that are affiliated with that university. And I think the goal and the mechanism of that university is one of the great things that we have. And I continue to work with them to this day as their assistant dean over business development. And they honored me by, bestowing upon me a doctorate of humane letters, and I'm very honored by that. And after doing that, you're able to finish things that you should have done maybe years ago, like this book, The Art of the Interview, and how to. And a lot of people think it's a teaching mechanism on how to interview, but it really is kind of uh, how I got this information out of some of these great, great people that are featured in this particular volume of the book.
And before we tell people, I got one more question before we tell people how to get your book. Not only do you go by Dr. Patrick Freeman, but you've always gone by another nickname.
Yes, sir.
The Mighty Oba.
The Mighty Oba.
For the record, talk to our audience about where the name, the moniker, the Mighty Oba came from.
Well, when I first started doing sports, I was saying I was the king of sports. And then I walked into the studio and Dr. Curtis Simpkins was there. He's the biographer, the unauthorized biographer of John Coltrane. And he looked at me and said, King of sports? No, you're not the king of sports. You're bigger than that. You're the Oba. And the Oba is the wise man of the village. And I said, yeah, the Oba. And so I put mighty on it, and it became the Mighty Oba. And that's what I've gone by ever since. And all of that is in the book. If you look at the front of the book, that symbol on the front of the book was done by Miss Karen Huff years ago. And the design of the book are the great artists James Cooper and John Baker. They did the design of the book, and did an awesome job. But that nickname, the Mighty Oba, is my favorite, and that's what more people call me the Mighty Oba than anything else.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's the book, The Art of the Interview, Book 1. Dr. Patrick Freeman, aka the Mighty Oba. If anyone wants to obtain this book, tell them how they can go about doing it.
Well, they can do the search on Amazon. It's available on Amazon. If you're in the Buffalo area, I would suggest you go to Zawadi Books. There's a new bookstore I'm trying to affiliate with in Rochester. I'm going to reach out to them probably tomorrow. And if you want a signed copy of the book, you need to contact me. You can reach me at my email, pfreemanrcmfl@gmail.com. That's pfreemanrcmfl@gmail.com and request. I'll get you the information on how you can request a signed copy, and I'll send it to you in the mail, just like I did you, Doug. I sent it to you in the mail, signed it for you and everything.
Absolutely. And Dr. Patrick Freeman, aka the Mighty Oba, thank you for being a part of the Buffalo History Channel.
Honored, and thank you for having me.